Thanks everyone for joining. I think we've still got a few people coming in, but we'll get started. My name's Paula Kemp. I am Head of Employer Engagement at the Social Mobility Commission, and welcome to our masterclass today on outreach, how to build an inclusive recruitment pipeline for your organisation. I'm delighted today to be joined by a few of our speakers, but before we get to that stage of me introducing them and us continuing with the presentation, just a few bit of housekeeping really. So if you could remain on mute, I think you're already on mute as it's part of a webinar, but if you could remain on mute, that would be great. The chat function has actually been disabled. However, you can ask questions in the Q&A function, and you will see posted in the chat messages from our colleagues. And the webinar will be recorded today, and also slides have been shared with you. If you go into the chat, the link's there, but also they'll be shared with you afterwards as well. So I'm delighted today to be joined by a number of speakers to talk about outreach and how you can build that socio-economic inclusion within your outreach programme. So as well as a short presentation from me, we'll be speaking with Speakers for Schools, and they'll be talking a bit about engaging with schools and young people, and that's Rachel Saunders and Fumbi Akande from Speakers from Schools. And then we'll be joined in a panel discussion from Cordelia Bunnis from JP Morgan and Tom Russell from Bentley Motors. And so please do use that Q&A function for any questions as we go along through the session, and we'll do Q&A at the end where we'll bring Speakers for Schools back in as well to answer any questions you have. And then our next steps is just where can you find more resources, how can you find information, etc., etc. What is social mobility? Well, social mobility is the link between an individual's occupation and that of their parents. I think the reason we're all here today is because we want to build socio-economic inclusion into our practices, and we want to ensure as employers and organisations that we ensure that your background doesn't predict your future. So what sort of activities can we do to help support that? We know that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And this map shows the social mobility cold spots where there's low social mobility, so lack of opportunities that we've just spoken about really for young people in terms of improving their outcomes in terms of employment. And so the darker blue indicates low social mobility, and the darker orange, as we go up to the warmer colours, there's opportunity for higher social mobility, but obviously within that you've still got people who are having difficulty in terms of finding opportunities. So what we recommend people do in their outreach program is really target some of those cold spots. If you're based in a cold spot already, you can target a lot of the schools around there. But if you're in some of the warmer spots, maybe you want to consider schools that have high levels of free school meals, and also tap into further education colleges. Twice as many people from low socioeconomic backgrounds attend further education colleges, so that's a really good opportunity for you to engage with those young people. We've done a couple of pieces of research that I just want to highlight in terms of how it's important to develop a pathway from schools into social mobility cold spots, but also through further education colleges, and consider how your outreach programs are reaching these people. So one of our first pieces of research was published earlier in the year, is the road not taken, and what it shows us is that people from low socioeconomic backgrounds, even if they perform just as highly as others in school in their GCSEs, those students are likely to choose post-16 courses that lead to lower earnings. So 40% of those youngsters haven't received career guidance before the age of 16, so whilst in school. And then the courses they tend to opt into in higher education or further education colleges, or even within secondary sixth form colleges tend to lead to lower earnings, more technical roles. So you'll see there that, you know, not only from low socioeconomic backgrounds, but also women in particular, and people from Black Caribbean backgrounds, you know, are less likely to take part in those or engage with those courses that lead to higher earnings. So employers can really drive some action in terms of their outreach. So in terms of working with secondary schools to provide information that and guidance to pupils in terms of the routes within an organisation. So what's the pathway? What types of roles do you have? You may be, you may be a financial a financial service provider, but there are technical roles within financial services, but those roles people are just not aware of. They're not, you know, when you think of banking, for instance, you might think of you need to be in a branch or in a head office and you're a banker, rather than you've got obviously lots of technical roles, marketing roles, HR functions, all those sort of back office functions that people just might not be aware of. But also look at using some role models, and in particular female role models, so that female people who might tend to opt out of some of these engagement with some career paths see people like them, or understand that there are roles and there's opportunities for them. And also really consider how you would showcase the personal journey, and what are the specific courses that people have taken that then have led them into their roles. So you hear wonderful stories of people getting into an organisation through accountancy, but then moving into marketing or vice versa. So, you know, really showcase that there's opportunities through your organisation to work your way through organisation and different types of roles. We've also did some research that was published earlier in the month, and our report shows the barriers young people face when engaging with careers advice. So the research was actually around online careers advice, but it was quite interesting in terms of some of the results that it threw up, and it really showed whilst lots of young people struggle with careers advice, and it can be very overwhelming. There's a lot of information out there, but in particular, people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are more likely to face these barriers that you'll see on the screen here. So a disadvantaged young person is more likely to lack belief that their career search would be successful, which is low self-efficacy. And I know Rachel from Speakers from School will speak a bit on that a bit later on as well. And their career aspirations are based on social norms. So people that they know, people in their family or in their local community, and the types of jobs that are being done around them. So that's particularly if you're in a low social mobility cold spot. If there are a real lack of some of those opportunities around there, people are focused on what are the opportunities close to them, and they're just seeing that. Further information about careers from just their friends and their personal networks, and they consider that hot information, and so they really take on board what they're saying around them rather than necessarily engaging with that careers advice, and especially when it supports their own personal point of view. So that's the confirmation bias, so that you know it confirms that those jobs may not be for them, and so they're likely to disengage with it. And I think employers need to also consider the concerns that young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds might have in terms of being risk averse. So courses that they feel that might end up costing them a lot of money, or careers that they feel that there's, you know, you have to go to university for, and that's going to cost you. Whereas of course there are apprenticeship roles that you could be being paid whilst engaging with that type of learning. So you know, there's financial or social costs in terms of they might think that they'd have to move out of the area, and what would they do about familial support and the social support network they've got around them. And even when they plan to engage with career information, they may not get around to it. They may have other priorities within their life that others may not have. So for instance, they may have a part-time job to support their education, or they may have family responsibilities where both parents are working shift patterns or whatever, and they're looking after younger siblings or whatever. But there are some fantastic it leads for some fantastic opportunities for employers to design outreach programs with having this information in mind to help overcome those barriers. So as I said on the previous slide, that providing information that will hearing those different stories and providing information that will increase a pupil's awareness of the types of roles and the range of options available to them, and also engaging with parents as well. So sort of really challenging those social norms in terms of roles that are available, and really getting parents on board as well. And I think we'll hear from our employers later on in terms of the ways they have done that. And then there's some tried and tested exercises that you could consider. So self-persuasion exercises, for instance, if you're asked to consider the value of a particular behaviour and write about it, and then that particular behaviour may lead you to think about the behaviour that you have, and then what it can translate to into a career. So for example, an engagement with social media, etc., could lead to a career in digital, that could lead to a career in any industry, because everyone's involved in in their marketing, etc. And our research was designed to test behavioural nudges that might increase engagement with online careers advice. But what we found was that disadvantaged people engage less, even when it's within a mandatory setting, so even within the school and the classroom. So therefore, we would really recommend that your careers advice, whilst we've obviously in the last 18 months been led down in terms of a lot of online and virtual engagement with schools or with our outreach, definitely don't overlook the face-to-face, the value in the face-to-face accessibility, etc., and make sure that guidance is reaching those that need it most. So that's going back to the thinking about the further education colleges, or targeting schools with higher levels of free school meals. And just that would enable you to create opportunities for those without any natural or privileged kind of networks that often happens within your industry or within an industry, and therefore really reach those wider groups of people, which I know that everyone's keen to do in their outreach. So where to start with your outreach? Well, our colleagues, our speakers on the call will actually fill us in this, but to really engage with these three dimensions. So walk in the shoes of the applicants. How can you apply what we've spoken about before into your, into judging the motivation, and what channels do they use and where do you find them? And then really consider within your organisation, what do you want to achieve? Who can support you? What employees? Who's backing it for your leadership team? And also in terms of where do you reach? And then I think by doing that, you'll enable sort of an awareness and improve the opportunities and really enable social mobility. So I'm going to hand over to Rachel Saunders now and invite Rachel to come onto the call. And she's going to speak in terms of from speakers from school. So Rachel.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Paula, and thank you so much for that really rich background. So I'm Rachel Saunders from Speakers for Schools. My colleague Fimby and I, who I'll introduce in a few moments, will take you through some information about just who we are and what we do. And hopefully there's information here which will be of use to you, either if you'd like to work with us to do outreach and engage with schools and young people, or if you're thinking about designing your own programme. Hopefully there's value here either way. Should we move on to the next slide? So just in terms of who we are, we were founded 11 years ago by Robert Peston, who's ITV's political editor, and the reason he chose to found us as a charity is that he found that he was being invited to go and speak to lots of posh public schools, and that there was kind of an expectation that that would be a great opportunity for him to go and speak to those particularly privileged young people, but that he wasn't being invited at all to talk to state schools. And even when he approached them himself, and he went to a state school himself, he found that those state schools thought they'd have to pay him, which absolutely wasn't the case. And he knew that there were many people who would be passionate about inspiring young people and supporting them with their future. So the first program that we set up is the Inspiration Program, which is a network of over nearly 2,000 schools and nearly 1,000 eminent guest speakers. Quite naturally from that grew an experience program, because obviously when senior people are going into schools, someone might say, oh, you know, would it be possible to have a work experience placement with your organization? So we had a small experience program pre-pandemic, but then when the pandemic happened, it became really clear really quickly that there was going to be a need to make sure that young people could engage with employers and businesses and senior, you know, leaders across all different professions, and that we were going to need to take that online and to scale it up quickly, which is what happened. So we can move on to the next slide. So now we have a virtual delivery model for both inspiration and experience, and that's significantly grown. So we had nearly 60,000 virtual work experience placements in the last academic year, and we work with nearly 4,000 schools for inspiration. So really significant scaling up over the course of the pandemic. It's now possible to access opportunities from us and other partner organisations through the Youth Card app, which you can look up if you'd like to. And we're moving into progression. So we're thinking about what more we can do to help young people with the advice and support they need to consider higher further education or job opportunities. So next slide. So what we'll focus on talking about today is our experience program. So just some logos there from some of the many businesses that we work with to provide work experience placements, which are all about enabling young people to experience the world of work, to expand their understanding of careers and pathways, and as Paula described so effectively, to tackle some of those issues of bias where young people are likely, especially from disadvantaged backgrounds, to make choices based on what they can see around them and the advice they get from the people they know well. We're seeking to expand their sources of advice and information as broadly as we can. So next slide. So basically, an in-person work experience obviously is where a young person goes to the place of work and an employer. That's still not happening much at the moment. It'd be interesting actually to get any reflections from businesses on the call and the Q&A as to when in-person might feel possible again. But at the moment, it's very much the case that virtual work experience feels like it's continues to be what is doable for both employers and schools and young people. So that's our focus for now, but we're very keen to get back to more in-person work experience as well. And obviously for schools in England particularly, this meets their need to meet Gatsby benchmarks, and it helps them deliver against the Ofsted personal development judgment as well. So it's really important to schools and young people. So these few slides with various bar charts on are from some research that we did, which I've just put in the chat, the link to it. So we did some research which was called Making Up for Lost Time, where we asked young people what would be useful to them to kind of make up for lost time during the pandemic and to improve their confidence in their future career prospects. We also polled MPs and business leaders, if you want to look at the report, but focusing now on what young people are saying they want and need. Internships or work experience come top when it comes to building young people's confidence. So if we reflect back at Paula's data on challenges around confidence for disadvantaged young people, it is work experience that they say can make a real difference to building their confidence. All of these other things are important as well. So having a part-time job is great. Mock interviews, careers advice, CV workshops, you know, all these things are good. But work experience was really important to young people when we polled them. And when we asked them about the biggest barriers to their success, so a different question, but not being able to get relevant work experience was a real worry. Not knowing what they want to do is also a concern for many young people. So that speaks to a similar challenge in many ways, in terms of just having access to that information and knowing what your future might look like. Lack of jobs in your area, lack of entry level jobs, not knowing how to get a job, all of these things are important, but you can see really clearly how vital work experience is to young people themselves. So having heard from young people that work experience is vital, what did they tell us about what's important to them? And this is just something to reflect on when thinking about your provision of work experience. So it needs to be in the right sector, so we need the widest possible range of businesses to be offering it. Young people want to learn essential skills, and in the semi-structured interviews we also did as a part of this research, they reflected that when it came to things like leadership, teamwork, problem solving, they don't always get the chance to practice those skills in school. So actually the chance to actively learn and practice those skills as part of a placement, really important. Knowledge of the business is obvious, I think. Chance to connect my existing learning to the world of work. So if you can, and it's a kind of a more sophisticated level often for many employers, not everyone can do it, but if it's possible to chat to a teacher and see if you can illustrate something about what's going on in the classroom and how that's relevant to your work, then that's fantastic. It's important to reach a range of people in the business, so great to hear from a senior leader that recruiting young people is important. Also really important to meet somebody who's in early career, some bit of a role model, someone that young people can relate to. And the chance to get feedback on your work is also vital. So something like undergoing a project through the week, which you're responsible for maybe working with others to complete, and all the different information that you get from different people in the business feeds into the project, and then you get feedback on what you've produced at the end, is the kind of model which would meet these sorts of objectives. Next slide. So this is now moving into what it's realistic to expect we can achieve through a work experience placement. So, we can't fix everything, but what are the things we need to do to have a great placement, and what are the outcomes that we should expect to see immediately, and what might we want to measure over time? So I won't read through all of this. It will be circulated with the slides, but and some of this is really dependent on the school. So the support of a school leader, the ability to prepare and to reflect afterwards are all substantially down to the school to make sure that it happens. But what you can do in providing placements is make sure they're interactive, personalised, so you're talking to the individual, not just to a group at all times. Welcome young people who are interested in multiple placements. They might be interested in finding out about different parts of your business. They might just want to engage with you again. You might be able to have some placements which are shorter and more taster, and some which are longer and a deep dive into different parts of your organisation. Make sure that you challenge stereotypes, showcase your male nurses and your female engineers, and make sure that young people have the chance to interact with people who have different experiences, to share different journeys into the business, different experiences within your business. And you should expect quite quickly to have young people feedback to you that they have increased insights into the jobs and careers that you offer, that they articulate increased motivation to find out more, and that they can feedback on their essential skills. And then the sustained outcomes that you should expect to see about self-confidence, efficacy and aspiration, the outcomes really of a sustained careers programme in which work experience plays a key part. Next slide. So I'll pass to Fimbi, but just to summarise here, what you expect to see from employer engagement in schools is the development of personal and cultural capital, which has some of these important outcomes. And I'll pass to Fimbi to go into our own data in a bit more detail.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. I'm Fumbi Akonde, the Policy Officer at Speakers for Schools, and I'll be discussing our data that's come from our impact measurement on the placements we've run so far this academic year, or actually last academic year in spring. Right, next slide, please. Right, so we ran a campaign called the Green Skills Week, which was just about introducing young people into the green economy and what jobs are opening up in that part of the economy. So, it was all around the range of, placements that dealt with recycling and sustainability. And we then measured that through pre and post placement surveys. And 99% of young people who joined those placements said it made them feel more confident about the world of work. Remember, this was during the time where the pandemic was still going on and a lot of young people were home, the exams were canceled. So just knowing that, employers were actually willing to, give them time, talk to them about, what career pathways are available, which was what they felt most confident about learning. Young people want to learn that, you don't just have to go to uni. There are different pathways through things like, apprenticeships and all the different ways the employers were getting people on. That was quite helpful for them. And then knowing their career options was the second thing they rated quite highly, because they knew the right. There are different ways of actually getting to where they're going, because as Paula said earlier, about 40% of young people don't actually receive the career guidance. So hearing directly from employers about the career options in different industries and different employers specifically is quite helpful for them. And the third thing was knowing what employers are looking for in terms of what skills what the employers need, what skills will employer need in a couple of years down the line. If you're in school and your teacher is telling you about your writing not good enough, but the employer is actually looking into what you can do with Excel and PowerPoint and different, it's just knowing what employers are looking for was very helpful for them. And following those placements, 9 out of 10 felt very well informed about careers in the either the industry or the sector of the employer that provided the placement. So it was quite helpful for them, and the number not considering a career in the industry sector, it dropped by from like 19% to 6%, whilst those that were now considering a career either with the employer or in the industry itself went up from 40% to 51%, which we found, we're quite happy about. And so to learn more about that, we've now have the youth card, which gives us the opportunity to empower more young people by helping us track their journey and, sharing data to kind of know what's leading to motivation. So through using the youth card, young people can do more placements, and it also gives them access to the different opportunities that employers have. Next slide, please. So what we're learning from the placement we've done, it's about prioritizing disadvantage. So we did the research earlier with the Education and Employers Charity, which showed that, sustained meeting with employers was leading to more, increased confidence by students who were either girls or on free school meals. So they felt, the impact of all this engagement with employers more than their peers. And that's one thing, when you're talking about leveling up, you want to be targeting young people who are living in cold spots where the schools are rated badly by Ofsted, where there's high pupil premium or there's high free school meals, or, students that are in care, which is what we tend to prioritize in our program. And in terms of, working with careers program, we tend to work quite a lot with teachers just so we know what it is they want, the work placements to be showing, and just building that link between work and the world of school. And also having clear learning outcomes it's quite important. So when providing placements, there has to be skills that employers should be thinking about. So what skills do you think are lacking in people that are joining your companies? And these are skills that should be now tied to those placements that are being run. And they have to be interactive and safe. I think safeguarding is one of the most important things, because you don't want to run a placement and at the end of the day, there's young people don't feel safe on it. So we tend to have at least 5 young people in every placement. It's usually more than that, but we'd recommend nothing less than 5, so that there's no one-on-one contact online. We make it breakout sessions so that they're quite interactive. You can speak to young people and get them to really open up. The first place, people might turn their camera off, but the more you deal with them and speak to them, they quite open up, and then they become quite engaged. And you'll be surprised that the kind of work they submit via the project And this then leads to employers being able to give individual feedback, which is very important because that might be the first feedback on what that, those young people have got from an actual employer. I think about 52% or so of young people that are joining our placement have never had any work experience. So just having that feedback from an employer, from someone like Bentley or JP Morgan is very important, and it's something they can then even attach to when they're doing the UCAS application. So next slide, please. All right, yeah, what do we want people have to say about the placement? It's made them grow in confidence and in teamwork skills. As Laura said, Paula said earlier, they're quite risk averse, but having those placements just increases their confidence, knowing that, if you're doing graffiti, for instance, there are actually jobs as an artist, whereas you might never know anyone who's an artist, but that just boosts their confidence in knowing what they wish to do. And yeah, by the end of the week, they wish it lasted longer because they made so many connections on those placements. And yeah, so it's mostly positive feedback, and definitely we'd encourage people to engage with young people through work placements. Next slide, please. And yeah,
I think that's it. Thank you.
That's it for me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bumby. And hopefully there's lots of ideas there that people can get take away with them and have a think about how they could build their own programme or indeed engage with Speakers for Schools. So I am delighted to welcome two people to our panel session. So we've got Cordelia Bunnis, who's Global Philanthropy from JP Morgan. So JP Morgan are committed to better prepare young people for the jobs of today and tomorrow, both within their industry and in other in-demand industries. And they do that by their philanthropic investments and in leveraging the skills and expertise of their employees to provide young people with mentoring and real life work experience. And Cordelia will be filling us in a bit more on that. And then we've got Tom Russell, who's early careers manager from Bentley Motors. So Bentley Motors is a worldwide leading luxury mobility company, and the company's outreach program aims to advance life chances for a diverse range of individuals, actively engaging with schools, colleges and universities, as well as a range of charities. So if I could welcome them both, and I will stop sharing my screen there, welcome them both to it. And just while we've got them both coming on, just to let you know that a couple of our speakers today have young people, their children at home sick. So if there's any small people coming into the frame, please just roll with it. So thank you both for joining us. Cordelia, I'm going to start with you. So outreach often sits within CSR, and I know it does at JP Morgan. So I wonder, how do you ensure that the work experience programs that you provide feed into your talent pipeline?
Yeah, thank you very much, Paula, and thank you for having me here today. So taking maybe just one step back, JP Morgan is one of the largest financial institutions, and so definitely feels that they have a key role to play in creating a diverse talent pipeline. There are loads of initiatives within the organisation, and to name a few, we've got diverse recruiting efforts, a strong diversity, equity and inclusion agenda, and we also have the work of the JP Morgan Chase Foundation, which is where I sit in the global philanthropy team. And one way which I was going to talk about today is through a programme that we run called the Aspiring Professionals Programme, which we call APP. And the APP is a 2-week work experience programme for students in their penultimate year of school. So they're 16, 17. They come on to join JP Morgan for 2 weeks on a residential, and they get the work experience and as well a mentor, not just for the 2 weeks, but actually the 12 months post the programme. And they also have the opportunity after they've left school to come back for more work experience if they so wish to. So that's the programme that I look after and we'll be referencing kind of here today. But in terms of kind of how we sit within the CSR, but also thinking about our diverse talent pipeline, we see this topic is really important within JP Morgan. And it's actually a kind of collaboration between HR, the business and philanthropy. So we have joint aims that we kind of work towards in order to kind of meet in all kind of aspects of the programme. So we obviously target high achieving students from low income backgrounds, but we help them make informed choices about their pathway after school. We help them to access education and training to be recruitment ready, and we also help them progress within quality careers. So kind of logistically how it works is the foundation provides the funding and sits kind of strategically on the program management side. HR also sits strategically and provide the resources, and the business provide the mentoring and the placements.
Brilliant, thank you. That sounds great, actually. It's great to have it all linked through. So Tom, for Bentley Motors, I know that outreach ties in with your corporate objectives. Can you tell us a bit more about that and how you feel it drives engagement at a leadership level?
Yeah, absolutely. And just probably should point out that's not my garden behind it. Clearly is a background, although we like to keep the cars in boxes. Yeah, it's what we do is really tie it into our corporate targets and strategic targets. I think it's really important, because that means that there's feedback and engagement right back up to board level as to what we're doing when it comes to what we call our social mission, and that includes a lot of different aspects of outreach, which that sits with my team when it comes especially to early careers outreach. But we work really closely with the director of government relations and CSR, because it really is a joint effort. And so that's the team that really heads up the social pillar of our corporate strategy. We work on an annual and a 5-year plan to different, it does have KPIs behind it, but realistically we're working at a lot of short, medium and long-term targets when it comes to what do we need to do, where do we want to get to, and how are we going to get there through a range of activities, which feed back into, for me, the outreach stream of that pillar. So we're reporting on that every month. And what we're doing, we're taking feedback from a wide range of stakeholders through that steering group, and that allows us to make sure that what we're doing is focused on the company's strategic targets. And because it's got that visibility then at right up to board level, that means that we get a really good level of engagement from our senior leaders in the business, because they at least know of and understand what we're doing when it comes to outreach, and why we're doing some of the things with an EDI lens on it as well.
Brilliant. And I guess that also helps kind of link into making sure that the talent that you're bringing through and the people you're talking to at a very early age are suiting your long-term objectives for the business, which is a really important thing to build in as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And while we work really closely on the social mission side of things, we're also tied in really closely with our people growth and collaborations, part of our corporate strategy, and that ties into things like strategic workforce planning. So we also need to make sure that when we bring the most diverse range of people through our talent pipelines, that we're going to have the right jobs for them with the right skills that mean they can stay in the business for a sustainable period of time. So absolutely, it's tied in at both levels to the corporate strategy.
Fantastic, thank you. So our pathways to success, so I talked a bit about the research earlier, showed that a variety of career options and different pathways into them can mean careers advice material seems a bit overwhelming, really, and young people will often fail to engage. So I just wondered, Cordelia, can you give us a bit of an idea of how you reach candidates from lower socioeconomic backgrounds?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the main aim obviously is to try and reach the most deprived areas of the UK for this programme in particular. So we recruit students actually from across the country, and our partner for this programme is the Social Mobility Foundation, and they have a partnership model with a relationship of over 3,000 schools. And it used to be very much in person. We've been running it for 10 years. So every year we would go out kind of September to December speaking to schools and making sure they understand the application process, and we would have teachers travelling 2 to 3 hours from rural parts of Scotland down to Glasgow, for example, to actually come and hear about the programme. So it was incredible, and obviously we were really happy that, you know, teachers would go above and beyond for that. Obviously in 2020 we had to pivot and everything had to go virtually, and we've definitely seen some big benefits to the virtual model as well. You know, that teacher that had to travel for 2 to 3 hours now has access to the programme information, you know, virtually as well. So hopefully that's broadened the kind of opportunities for students across the whole country to get involved. And we've also actually supported the Social Mobility Foundation with their hub model. and helping them actually open offices across the UK in order to reach students in the really kind of social mobility cold spots across the country. So yeah, we'll be moving forward with a kind of hybrid model, because we still, as I think was referenced earlier, the in-person events and information is really important, but the virtual element makes it more accessible as well. So we'll be going through kind of a hybrid model moving forward.
Brilliant, thank you. And Tom, how do you reach people from low socioeconomic backgrounds?
For us, it's really been about working closely with organisations. You just mentioned about, working with those organisations. That's really, I think, where we've made a step change in the last couple of years. It's to some extent been driven by the need to work more virtually rather than do a lot of in-person activity. But we feel that it's really working well now. So to give you some examples, the BAME Apprenticeship Alliance, Speakers for Schools is one. So working through those organisations that already have that reach to the communities we know we maybe don't traditionally reach, or where we know we can have an effect on young people who might not get the opportunity to engage with a company like Bentley normally, is one of the ways we've really gone about it. And actually, from a business's point of view, we maybe looked at it, and it's a bit overwhelming from a business's point of view as well, to think, how do we reach all these people that really could do with our inspiration and help and support? And it's been really good to work with some of those organisations to help bridge that gap. So for me, that's been key to reach those different communities.
Brilliant, thanks. Yeah, I mean, we say to a lot of people, there's a lot of organisations out there that can support you locally if you are based just in one location, elsewhere, and nationally as well. And I think, you've referenced a few of them there, and obviously we've got Speakers for School with us today, but there are some, we've got an organisational directory that can support you, so we can share that with the people afterwards. Cordelia, the Pathways research showed that a lack of self-belief that their career search might be unsuccessful, this low self-efficacy piece that we're talking about. What support do you provide on your programs to ensure better outcomes, or the best outcomes for those young people?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So looking back to the aims that I referenced earlier around helping them make informed choices about their career pathways after school. So we educate them on university degree apprenticeships, on the UCAS application process. So we kind of support from that element in terms of the career progression. The second aim is about education and training to be recruitment ready. And I think it was definitely referenced earlier around having a project to own and being able to develop skills such as presentation skills, teamwork, organisational, and that actually is quite a key part of our whole programme in making sure that the students get to own something, they get to work as part of a team, they get to present at the end, and they get feedback. So that is actually one of the key elements of the programme that really helps them, but also kind of progressing in other skill sets in terms of speaking to senior leaders and understanding the mechanics of an organisation they get from sitting on the desk and obviously working with our employees. So we try and educate them through those kind of examples, but the mentoring is actually a really, really key component. So they don't just get their mentor for 2 weeks, they get them for the whole 12 months. And these students are just choosing what they want to do after school. So we've had so many examples of mentors who, they've met their student, the student's gone, I think I want to do business at university, and that's what I've been told I should be doing. And actually, when the mentors really drilled in and understood what the student wants, it's actually geography, and they've gone to Cambridge, and it's been a real success story. So that mentor's there as someone that they might not have in their day-to-day kind of life, and has been a real fundamental, I think, change for those students. So those are just some examples of trying to get the best outcomes.
Brilliant, that's excellent, thank you. Tom, I know Bentley is based in Crewe, so you have a very physical base there, but how do you recruit from wider afield? So we did some research, I think it was last year, Moving Out to Move On, and that people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds might face other challenges. So the obvious one is financial challenges to move to a new location, but also familial ties. How do you support those who relocate to Crewe?
I think there's probably a few things to mention here. The first one is that we do review salaries quite regularly and make sure that we're giving people the financial ability to do that. I think that is important to make sure that that's in place. We also have quite a strong community of trainees, so we're fortunate that we have that group of people, and we make quite a lot through our recruitment and assessment processes and our outreach processes, that we have nearly 200 trainees in Crewe, and that might be interns or undergrads, but people of the same age. And actually, it's not dissimilar to a university or a study type environment, because they tend to live in the same houses, they might rent together, or even those that work within a commutable distance, they will do things. And there are work-based social activities is probably the best way of putting it. I guess for the last 18 months there hasn't been quite as much as that, but they're starting to regenerate themselves now, which is really nice. So when we talk to young people about the possible opportunities at Crewe, we talk about that support, non-financial support that's available. Because I think it's really easy to say, here's a joining bonus to help you relocate, but actually it's the worry of where am I going to live and who am I going to know, and all those sort of thoughts that may be going through a young person's mind. And we're still going through that for some that have been working remotely, and we're now saying to them, okay, it's time to now relocate to the northwest, because we are now back on site a lot more as well. And Paula, we were talking about a story where I always remember one particular apprentice who joined us 4 years ago. He was our first digital apprentice, actually. He's now in a permanent job in the IT department. But when he joined the business, I actually knew his mother 5 times better than I knew that apprentice, because I've been on the phone so much talking with her about where we can live and different sort of places they could go when they came up to pop out for a meal when they were visiting the company. So I think that's really important to engage with the wider family as well, and talk about the community that you have around your company. And it will be different for every company, because I appreciate that not every company has 200 trainees, but even if you've got 10, there may well still be that community that can be called upon.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you've got 10 but in all different locations, how could you think about them all coming together or being, you know, in some sort of alumni or whatever, or pre-alumni, I guess it is. So thank you. Just to remind people, we do have opportunity to ask questions. So I'm actually going to have a quick look to see what questions we've got asked. And then I have got a few more that I wanted to ask. So Tom, during your selection process, have you implemented any psychometric assessments that ensure candidates from minority groups, including candidates from low socioeconomic backgrounds, are passing at an even rate to those more privileged candidates?
So I guess the recruitment there's a little bit of the jigsaw that actually sits outside of my remit, because it's quite an objective process. So it is disconnected from all my outreach and then program work. However, we at the moment, I don't believe that's part of the process. We did in the past, but there's quite a big review going on at the moment within the business as to what's appropriate at that stage. Yeah. And that's part of a wider review across all of our pillars as to how do we ensure that we're giving those people who were the barriers in that outreach and recruitment process, and where can we make sure they're removed and it is as level a playing field as possible. So I think it's important if for those that do have psychometric tests, because a lot do, to really look at if they're the appropriate ones for the process. But at the moment, we don't have any.
Okay.
For the early careers anyway.
I think we've got on our website, we've got some people who talk about that. So do visit some of those success stories and best practices but it's all about, I mean, Rachel and Funbi both mentioned it's about that, you know, constantly review. So if you've done it 1 year and then have a look at who's coming through, is it reaching the people you want it to reach? So again, I think that's great. So we've had a question where it says, Cordelia mentioned projects during work experience. Could you share some examples? Just wondering how you came up with those projects with such a short time scale. So Cordelia, I'm going to ask you, and then I might ask Funbi and Rachel to come back in and maybe talk about other ones they've seen that are good. So Cordelia.
Yeah, so in our virtual programme that we've run the last couple of years, we set the students a very similar topic, just for ease of them all being virtually online. And the question we asked was, what company would you invest in and why? But we gave them a lot of resources to start with. So we gave them 4 organisations that they had to look into, and we gave them their kind of company reports and gave them quite a lot of information up front so that they could actually start the research, you know, with all of that information. And we also gave them a bit of guidance on the template and presentation. So we said, you know, maximum 3 slides, 5 people in a team, everyone has to speak. So we gave them quite a lot of guidance as to kind of what their presentation and project was, but it also gave them the kind of flexibility to make it their own. And they had to speak to, you know, all their kind of mentors and senior leaders. So there's one example, but yeah, I'm sure Funbi might have more.
Yeah, Funbi, Rachel.
Yeah, so I'll answer that. Right. So we work with different employers based on their industry and sector to already have a project in place, something like what Tom has done with his team at Bentley. And I'm sure he can share some examples if people get in touch with him after. What we usually do is make sure that the employer kind of frames a project around what they'll actually be delivering. So let's say if you're a construction company, you would have, someone who's maybe like a surveyor, you'd have a civil engineer, you'd have an accountant actually come in on the first day and say, right, if we're delivering a project, this is the role I'll take, this is the role someone else will take, and then get the young people to also adopt similar roles. And then by the end of the week, they now need to come back with a project. So you'll give them maybe like a 50 million pound, project and say, right, work on, doing this, and the surveyor will tell you normally this is what I'll do, go and research it, and you take on the role, and it will be something like that. Say if it's a marketing company as well, where someone will be like, all right, I'm a content creator, I'll work on the content, you work on the research. And so everybody kind of, just takes a role. And in that way, students are learning about teamwork, but also getting an insight into the different career pathways within a company. And that way, by the time you'll be speaking with them daily as well, because you want them to actually be delivering it bit by bit, or else you'll come back on Friday and nothing is done. So you want them to have a deliverable where you can kind of comment and show them, where to do the research. So I think that, just engaging with them daily, but giving them space to kind of work in small teams, it's very helpful. And then by the end of the week, you'll get something out of it where you can actually give them a feedback. And I think it's...
That's great, thank you. I think also another ones that I've heard about is where they're actually utilising, you've got young people there, find out what those young people think about your industry or your organisation, or how they can reach your organisation. So for instance, if you're trying to market a new app, or if that's what you do, or if you're, you work in creative industries and you're advertising, you're doing advertising campaigns for people who want to reach younger people, find out from them, use that way. So that's great, thank you. We've got a question around what health and wellbeing support is provided for work experience placements or employees, specifically with mental health. Is there support that is offered with a trauma-informed approach? I don't know if anyone wants to volunteer to take that. So Rachel, are you okay to take that?
Mention, we're running a campaign called Work Life in November, which is about encouraging businesses to kind of offer work experience placements where they talk about the health and well-being of their employees as a part of the placement. So I think it's important both that young people are aware of the health and wellbeing support that they should expect when they go to work for a particular business, and that they receive that message very clearly, that it's hugely important to very many organisations, and especially to the best and most high performing organisations, that they really support their people with their health and wellbeing. So yeah, absolutely, it's good practice, and we really encourage it and have a campaign on it to have that as part of a placement. The extent to which practice is always fully trauma informed, our safeguarding guidance doesn't mean that every employer volunteer doing a placement is themselves fully trauma informed, because that might not be realistic, but it does mean that we put practices and ways of working in place that should mean that young people who have additional needs or who need additional support will be able to find it, and that sessions are run in such a way that all young people should be able to access them and to really thrive and succeed as a part of the experience.
Brilliant, thank you. And I guess where other organisations could tap into their own, either if they've got a wellbeing network, staff network who could support them to understand what they might need to do, and think about some of those things from both a a young person's perspective, but also the employee might also, there's always a challenge, or there could be a challenge there, but also in terms of your own kind of health and safety team as well. If you're a large organisation, would have them as well. We're rapidly running out of time, so I think I'm going to ask sort of my final question is, how do you get buy-in from colleagues? I'm going to ask all of you here for sort of one piece of advice to get buy-in for colleagues, either for them to run a work experience program if they've got, or outreach program if they haven't already got one, or when you have got one, how to get other employees engaged. So I'm going to start with you, Cordelia, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think again it was referenced earlier, but getting buy-in from the top is really important. I think, you know, we have a structure at JP Morgan where we have a steering committee which is made up of managing directors across the lines of businesses, and they're kind of they take accountability for the program, set the strategy, and also kind of are a voice for us within JP Morgan. And then we kind of have a layer down which are host managers, and they're kind of senior people within each line of business who then find the appropriate and right mentors to then mentor the students. So yeah, my probably main advice is, I think, you know, as long as you've got a buy-in from the top, hopefully that kind of filters down within lines of businesses and can really help with you pushing the agenda out.
Brilliant, thank you. And Tom, how about if you're just getting started, what could you think about in terms of engaging with people? Or
I was going to say tell a story and think about the actual attraction and recruitment piece coming second. That will come if you get the outreach right. Then I would hope that recruitment piece and getting the right people in the business comes. So what we talk to our colleagues about is that we want to tell their stories. They've all got an individual story as to why they're at Bentley. And actually, I've been amazed and surprised at some of the backgrounds and some of the stories I've uncovered when I've been doing this. You just wouldn't expect it. And they're really keen normally to go and tell that story. They often have children themselves, and they really want to get out there and find the time. So yeah, tell the story of the individual and then link it to your attraction and recruitment, and keep it short and simple as well. So if I can get someone to come and do 20 minutes virtually as a first go, they often then will come back and say, can I get involved in something else? Because that was really good fun.
yeah, brilliant, thank you. Rachel?
I would just agree with what everyone said. What I would say is most organisations who really focus on outreach, and especially working in schools and doing it well, you can often start because you need to diversify your talent pipeline, or because you're looking to build your reputation in your community. But actually, it's almost always the employee engagement benefits that keep it going. You know, people who work for you will love volunteering with young people. They'll also really appreciate working for an employer which takes this seriously. So yeah, make sure that you're measuring the employee engagement benefits once you get going, because that can often be a really big part of the business case for sustaining these kinds of programs.
That's brilliant, thank you. Have you got anything to add, Fumbi?
No, I think everyone, supplied great answers, and yeah, it's just creating capacity for people who are joining those placements, knowing that, if they're going to be volunteering for that whole week, they're not going to be expected to also be, doing other things at the same time. So, when they work with young people, they need to really support them, jump on the calls when they're needed, because that's one of the things you get from young people, where the employer hasn't really supported them. They will give us that feedback at the end of the week. So it's just making sure that your colleagues are free during that time to actually support those young people. And once they've done it, like everyone said, they really, really feel, engaged with it. And yeah, they're more likely to come back and keep it sustainable going forward.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think also there's a piece around some organisations give volunteering days, so using those volunteering days maybe for outreach. And I heard we've had other employers tell us that they've done one where people have said, can I have my child come in, or a friend of the family's child come in for work experience? And they've said absolutely, but if you do that, you also then have to take someone we've identified, and therefore you're actually doubling your outreach by doing that. So there's some great opportunities to engage. I think we're running out of time, so I'd just like to thank all of our speakers. I'm just going to run a few more slides and then we'll close. But thanks to Tom and Cordelia for giving us that insight from the employer's perspective, and thanks for Rachel and Fumbi to giving us their having masses of experience of numerous employers they've worked with and everything. And if you want to have a look at some of the activity they're doing, please go on to our organisation's directory, because you'll find details of speakers for school from there. So thank you all. I'm just going to share my final screen here. I'm hoping you can see that. So if you're new to this, what you can do, so our employers on the call have given them some suggestions, but work with partners, please do, and visit our directory. Use data and measure, so assess who you're reaching, but also then measure the success, and target further education colleges and schools in social mobility cold spots for those pre-employment programs. And as we've said, as we closed off there, activate your employees to get involved, or your social mobility staff network, and be patient. It takes a long time to build. I mean, you know, Cordelia's talked about there's been a 10-year program, which I'm sure they're revisiting constantly. I know Tom's been working on it for a number of years as well. So be patient, and the results will come definitely. In terms of further resources, we have a number of resources. So there's a toolkit for a couple of industries, creative industries and financial and professional services, but we've also got one that applies to any industry, cross industry. So visit our website to find that. If you want to talk about class in the workplace, which really sparks the conversation and may get people, your leaders, your senior leaders or your staff, thinking about how they can build a more socio-economically diverse organisation. There's a resource for that. We've also got more events, we've got blogs, we have a maturity assessment that you might like to try, where you can see what activity you're currently doing, and then gives you some nudges and points you in the direction of other resources of where you can just step it up slightly. And also we've got a toolkit that was launched last week, apprenticeships that work for all, so that they reach those from a lower socioeconomic background. So I'd just like to thank our speakers again for joining us, and obviously thank you for joining us today, and yeah, have a great afternoon. Thank you.